Jason Rogers, my good friend and co-host. How are you today?
Garth, it's good to be back. I am great, and I'm really excited to launch the second George podcast into the universe.
Yeah, you call this the month of George, which I love. it's, it's great. And if you follow him on LinkedIn, it's like the daily dose of George. It's awesome. In this one, we're looking at his second book, Forward Together, and the concept together is really interesting to me, and the way that he, I think, ties it all together is by storytelling. And yet, and we'll talk about this in the podcast, he's got these amazing titles to each and every chapter. And listeners, if you haven't picked up his book yet, the chapter titles alone are amazing. And Jason, you and I have spoken about the power of storytelling before. And you and I have spoken about the power of a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And the chapters of this book sometimes can be reduced into a mantra. And you've talked about mantra mapping. I wonder, Can you tell me, what's the role of storytelling, mantra relationship? How do you use mantras in your school?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Garth. And I think, we could do an episode on just this, and maybe we should. But I do think that you should track a parent, a student, a staff member's journey from day one till, exit date. And sometimes that tracks over 25 years, sometimes tracks over 13 years, sometimes tracks over 2 years. Own the mantras that mark the milestones. Milestones are really important. And then inside those milestones, create narratives that support that journey. And I think it's a really important storytelling journey that schools, organizations, businesses can go on that support a consumer journey. So I think, there's a lot we could go into every one of those journeys and have something to talk about.
Listeners, did you catch that? Own the mantra that mark the milestones. That in and of itself is so much. I love it. And what George does in this book, Forward Together, is he really tracks his own stories and he boils them down into these key takeaways. He isn't prescriptive. He doesn't enumerate, this is how you are to, launch a movement in your school or get people behind you. But he gives you great provocations at the end of every chapter. He brings the energy in this one again, Jason. And I think the listeners are really going to get a lot out of it.
That's a perfect setup, Garth. Let's get right into it. People are going to love the show.
Enjoy, everybody.
Lassoing Leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Hey folks, welcome back to Lassoing Leadership Season 3, Beard's Book Club. But this is kind of like a special edition. We're going back to back with George. So last week you heard about Innovator's Mindset, still relevant, all those great things. And this week we're diving into his newest book, like hot off the press, Forward Together. So we're thrilled to be joined again by George, and as always, with my co-host, Jason Rogers. Welcome, Jason.
Yeah, unfinished business. I can't wait to get back into this with our very own George Couros. And talking about this new book is really exciting. I can tell you firsthand that this is an easy and enjoyable read that has depths of wisdom. And we're going to get into that today with George. George, first time ever back-to-back guest, so you must be something special. Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. It's good to have you, man.
Hey, I was actually thinking about you guys. There's I know you both read the book. When I mentioned Ted Lasso, right? Like I met Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental, and that was like a big thing for me. I do have to tell you the story. It's kind of funny. So I'm writing this book, and it's about how do we deal with conflict, and it was interesting. And there's a reason I bring up the Ted Lasso thing. I was on a podcast with Karen Vade. She does a lot of stuff with literacy, and I'm really about innovation. But my focus is really, you have to build basic skills. Like kids have to know reading and writing. They have to know numeracy. So you can't really be innovative unless you have the basics really down. So she posted about it, and she shared something, and it was really kind of fascinating. And somebody saw what she posted, never listened to the podcast, you can totally tell. And they said, reading and writing is now innovative. That's where we are in education. I want to put my head through a wall. That's what they actually shared on. I don't know who this person is. And what's amazing, I'm like, who is this person? And then I go to their profile. What does it say? Be curious, not judgmental. I'm like, ah, maybe a little judgmental. They need to be a little curious.
Hey, George, if you don't mind, could you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about how you came to this book? What's the background? Why is community so important to you when you're thinking about these topics?
Yeah, like I grew up in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. I know Jason's, very familiar with the area. It's only an hour where we went to university together, and it is really amazing to see the people that have come out of that community. And I would credit it to not just the school, but the school and the community working together. There's so much, and we all pushed each other. It was like a really great space. And I know, and one of the big things I share in the book is that schools aren't central to community; they are the community, and how important that actually is. And I grew up in a time, and I think I'm a little bit older than you guys. Maybe not Jason, but I'm probably a little bit older than you, Garth. But the really thinking about when I used to get in trouble in school, I then would get in trouble at home, and schools work together with families, and it wasn't because you're really trying to hurt us or cause trauma or anything like that. It's because they had such high expectations for us, and they worked together to do that. And I just know how beneficial that is. And I know how beneficial it is when I see communities currently doing that. And I don't want to pretend this doesn't exist in education, because there's literally, the book was inspired by a school community doing that. And that's where I really wanted, is that how do we bring communities together and not just like convince them of what we're doing is right, but actually make sure their fingerprints are all over those things, because then they're not your allies anymore. They become your advocates. They actually go out and say, hey, this is really great. So I think that to me was a really big focus of that. I just know we do better together. And it might not be exactly what we envisioned when we first, walked into the positions that you two are in right now, but I think it's way better. I actually think it'll be ultimately better because there's so much more ownership, more of it gets done. When I have say in it, I want it to happen.
Hey, George, let's get right into the book here. One of the things I love most about the book is the great stories. There's some truly great stories in here. And you bring up a story about Van Halen. Story, George, go for it.
No, I want you to tell us. Did you know it before you read the book?
I'd heard of it. It was a great reminder. The fact that Van Halen on their rider
Right.
required, right? Was it no brown M&Ms or all brown M&Ms? Which was it?
Yeah, no brown M&Ms, right? And it is actually funny because, I speak, I work, and people who don't know me, they're like, hey, do you want like red M&Ms? And they'll just kind of throw it out. And if they mention, I'm like, do I got a story for you? Because, they just kind of say that because, I try to pride myself on being pretty easygoing on the groups that I work with. But it was really, they had in their rider, basically there were to be no brown M&Ms, but it was a gigantic rider. And the reason was because they had all these technical needs for the stage show. And if you didn't do it properly, it could actually damage the stage. And so it is like buried deep down into the contract. So if they would go into their if they would go into their dressing room and there were no M&Ms or there were brown M&Ms, they knew people didn't read it. And so the connection I think was really valuable is that it's really, you have to pay attention to the details. The small details matter. And we always, this is forever since I've been alive, is like, hey, don't sweat the small stuff. But the small stuff, if you don't pay attention to it, it can become big stuff, and the big stuff can become bad. And so I think it's a really powerful story, and it's totally misconstrued over the years because it's like, oh, this is like diva treatment. It's like, no, it's actually like paying attention to the details. I don't know. I didn't add this in the book, but it's funny because they didn't actually pay attention to the contract. And I think it was David Lee Roth. He like smashed something in a locker room or in a hotel room, and it caused like $500 damage. But the stage, because they didn't do it properly, was like $500,000 damage. And it's like David Lee Roth loses his mind and it actually causes $500,000 damage. And it was like totally a lie. It just was a fascinating story. And I just, it was interesting. And I just that's one of the things I really like doing is telling like pop culture stories and then connecting it to education, because I think it's way easier to remember and, something I enjoy reading too.
And George, I think that's the core of this book really, is like narrative storytelling. If you read the book, it feels like I'm sitting down for a pint or a coffee with you and you're filling my boots with your wisdom, the stories like you've already demonstrated here. So George, let's just talk about narrative storytelling and the power in leadership for a moment. I know you touch on it in the book, but for our listeners, why is this such a powerful leadership tool in your mind?
Yeah, well, there's another story I share, and it's about Coca-Cola, right? And so again, aging myself, it is about basically when new Coke was introduced,
No
people were
Coke.
so upset about it. And you have this product that had existed forever. And then all of a sudden they're saying, like, hey, we're gonna do a new version. It's like, why would you do a new version? Everyone loves the old one. And when it was introduced, people were livid. They could not believe it. But what people actually didn't know is that they did taste tests with about 190,000 people, and overwhelmingly people picked the new version. And so when they introduced it, they thought it was a no-brainer that it was going to be introduced. But it wasn't that people didn't like the new version; they liked how the old one made them feel, and they had a connection to it. And that's what people missed out, and that they didn't realize the emotional connection to it. And so that's really what matters. You can take all of the ideas, you can say, "Hey, here is the evidence of why this is better." But if I don't feel an emotional connection to it, then there is a disconnect. And, Jason, I will say this to you. You're like, why would you talk about AI? It's going to age out. And I actually did talk a little bit about AI. I know it's a current topic. I don't think AI is going to go away in the next 100 years. It's going to evolve for sure. But one of the things I talked about is, do we just talk about, like, hey, well, how do we do this as students? And then you get all the fights. What I really try to talk about is, do people see it of value to themselves? And I connected about how basically you would use it in financial literacy. And as soon as they saw it as like, oh, this is actually could help me with my retirement, I don't really care about what you're saying. I'm going to start planning my retirement. Now it's a really good thing to leverage. And so when people not only see themselves as part of the story and as heroes in the story, and Garth, you mentioned the Rusty story. That's one of my favorites to tell. It was incredible, that experience. And I think the other part of it too is not just telling stories, but emulating stories in our professional learning. And Jason, you've seen me do this before. Like, I do
Yeah.
emotional connection,
Oh, for
and
sure.
there's ups, there's downs, and because it is people feel connected. When you have it should be like a good movie. And I will tell you, I'm reading the book as I'm doing the final edits, and I wrote in summer, hadn't touched it. And there's one line that I wrote, and I actually laughed out loud. I'm like, what was I thinking when I wrote it? And I said, you don't want, when you have to have the ups and downs because emotional connection, because you don't want a flat line, because you know when else you get a flat line? When you're dead. Like, that's literally,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what
Yeah.
was I thinking when I wrote it? But it is true, right? And it's like, that's, you want that life, you want that emotion connected. And it's not, that's what happens a lot of times is that people say, hey, why wouldn't you do this? It's so much better. Well, I don't, how is it relevant to me? I don't see any connection to it. They're missing the emotional connection.
Hey, George, can you tell us how your background in computer science informed you in your leadership, in your writing, in the future of the work that you're doing? Super curious about that.
Don't have a background in computer science. I have a background in sitting in a restaurant. That's my background. Actually, I don't know if Jason remembers this. The only reason I actually got into technology is because when Jason and I went to university together, there was one position on the student council that was open, and it was called Electronic Media Information Officer. And it was open, and I ran for it, and I won it because no one else ran for it. And so I made a website in university one time. And that was like, that one time made me one of the most experienced people in technology. So I applied for a kindergarten job, got a high school technology job. I had to learn it through the process. But I think part of it too is that a lot of times when we're talking about stuff, we're trying to use this fear based, like, oh, if you don't do this, this is going to come after you. And you might get people to move forward with that, but then they're kind of upset with you. You kind of make them feel bad. What I really want people to say is like, hey, not what am I going to lose? What do I gain? Right. And I think part of it too, and a lot of times we talk about the aspirational stuff and then we kind of crap on the foundational when the foundational is what leads to the aspirational. And people need to see themselves like, hey, some of those aspirational things that we're doing, we often forget how important the fundamentals are, how literacy is, right? And there was a story when I talked about writing the innovator's mindset and how terrified I was because there was a parent in the community who was like basically like going after people for talking about anything with technology. So I'm like, I better know what she's saying because I don't want her coming after me. She doesn't know who I am, but she's probably going to find out pretty quick. And then I started reading her stuff. I'm like, oh, I totally like agree with everything she's saying. I'm just missing it. I'm not talking about it. So what I said is that it wasn't her versus me. She made my stuff better. She made it more grounded. And it was, I think part of it too is I was, and as I share in the book right at the beginning, I was the one pushing people away from this stuff that I was really trying to get. And it was like, you don't do this or else. Like that was my approach, and really kind of reframing that and thinking about like, if you would have done that, if you do that to me on anything today, I'd still push back, right? It doesn't have to be technology; it can be anything. And so it's really, you want people to want to get there, not if you don't or else. That's what I don't want to appreciate, because if you do get them there, they're going to resent you eventually. Can I just stop you for a second? Can I just stop you for a second? You wrote a review and it was very, very kind, but I was very upset with you. I was very upset with you because you wrote in the review, you wrote, "Forward together. It's not just a title, it's a mantra." I'm like, that's what I should have said. That's what I should have said. I was so mad at you. And I was like, that is like such a good line. And I gave you credit for it. I wrote about that you said, I'm like, and I even did the George Costanza. That's what I should have said. It was good. I was like, that was good. That was really good.
Okay, George, as we said, there are so many good stories throughout this book. One of them is, titled "Don't Forget the Smell." Can you tell our listeners what that's all about? It's a good one.
Yeah, so I talk about basically in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, I couldn't get a job, and so I'd go get these like odd jobs and whatever. And one of them was actually cleaning out a pig barn, and it was like it wasn't like it's not like just cleaning out a pig barn; it was cleaning out a diseased pig barn, which I was like way worse for some reason. And no one lasted that job, and so I went there. I remember pulling up one night. I'm like, oh my God, is this stink out here? This is so gross. And then I go in, I'm like, oh my God, this is so bad. And I spent probably, I think, 12 hours in that space. And it was just horrible. And then you just kind of get used to it. And then I remember walking out in that same stink that I walked like outside. I'm like, oh, that fresh air is so nice. And it was horrible before. And you just become numb to this stuff. And I think a lot of times in the profession, we just do what we do and we don't think about it. And so we just get used to negative stuff. Like I remember years ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he wrote a blog post, and I've talked about it before. He said schools do not need principals, and I'm a principal, so I'm livid that he's writing this. He's basically saying how irrelevant they are. I said, the reason you are writing this is because you don't have a good principal. Because I know what a good principal can do, because they totally changed my life. Like it is so different. And he's like, no, they're useless, whatever. 2 years later, he's like, you were right. Like the principal I have is so good. And I think part of it too is like we become a little negative about stuff, and it is what it is, and we don't think how we can change it. And I think a lot of times, like I go and seek change. That is part of my nature, because I am just striving for. And one of the things I talk about is risk. There is a risk in staying the same, and that is something we need to be concerned of. And I just think that really, really matters, that we got to kind of just sometimes take a step out. And the advice I always give to people, when you're talking to yourself, right? When you're going through this, don't talk to yourself. Talk to yourself like a friend, you like how you talk to a friend, because a lot of times we give our best advice away to others. We don't take it ourselves. And we have to kind of step out of ourselves to say, like, what is this situation? Is this as bad as I think? And sometimes you might step out and go, you know what? It really isn't that bad, right? We might be just there's a lot of times where I'm having a bad day, but I think it's a bad year, right? And so it's like, no, this is just a moment I'm going through right now. So I think that really matters.
George, gosh, if you like this conversation, this book is absolutely for you, because it's exactly how the book feels. Couple things before I get into, one of my last questions here, George, is I remember that position at the student leadership side.
Right. Yeah.
I turned that one down, but I also turned down valedictorian. I think they gave that to you as well, didn't they?
No, they did.
I
didn't get that either. No, I got the most to the parents. That's what I got.
But
I've got no one else wanted to do it, so that's what I got.
I've got notes and notes.
My life is the leftovers. That's what I got.
I have notes and notes and notes. I want to cover so many things, but I think I'm going to double back to something we talked about before we came on air, because I actually really enjoy the story and I enjoy hearing you talk about it. But as you close up the book, there's a chapter titled "Learn to Clap for Yourself."
Yeah.
Tell our listeners, what is this all about, and how does this play out? What does this have to do with communities together, leadership?
Well, okay, so I know both of you, your positions, and here's something crappy will happen to you. and you'll hear this, and this is the worst statement of you'll ever hear in school. That's why you make the big bucks. It's like, here's the worst thing. It's like, hey, this parent totally berated me, said the worst things about me ever. And like, how horrible person. That's why you make the big bucks. And it's like, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter. And, it is hard to be in that, especially when you're an administrative position. It can be really isolating. And we often, and I talk a lot about this, we often are very comfortable giving negative feedback, but something positive, we kind of hold back. Like, we hold this back. And one of the things I talked about is basically, when I go to schools, and I do this all the time because, I'm getting to a school for an event, and I look up a map, show the reviews. Reviews are always terrible, right? Like 90% of the time, they're terrible. And why are they terrible is because it's the person who's mad, that they're mad at you and they love writing that review. The person who's happy doesn't say anything. And sometimes we have to encourage them, but I also think we have to kind of take a step back and encourage ourselves and kind of say hey, how am I actually doing? And I talk a lot about the notion of confidence. And there's a spectrum I talk about between insecurity, confidence, and arrogance. And insecurity is that, you don't think you're good enough. Arrogance is you think you're better than everybody. And confidence is knowing, hey, I do some great stuff, but I can always grow. And, I just wrote a post about it. I just shared in my community coming up this weekend, talking about, some of my confidence is I'm very comfortable with my weaknesses. I know what they are. And that actually helps me because when I used to hire people, who were good at things that I wasn't. And I was very open about that. So the notion of clapping for yourself is just kind of taking a step back and appreciating how far you come. And, I know both of you guys, and I know that we have high aspirations, and we always can kind of get down on ourselves. And we're achieving stuff that people think how is that person doing it? And we're like, we can be better. And I think sometimes you just gotta hey, I'm doing a good job. I've done a good job. I can still get better, but I got to appreciate where I am. Because if you're just kind of always, putting yourself down, even when you're doing a good job, eventually it's just going to wear on you. And especially in school leadership, this is a thing. You just hammer yourself over and over again. And it does not matter the position in education, school leadership, teacher, support staff, doesn't matter. We never get the praise. And a lot of times you hear the story of hey, this kid came and talked to me 30 years ago. I'm like, why wouldn't you tell me then? Why are you waiting 30 years for this? And I think you have to kind of acknowledge, and be proud of the work that you're doing. I won't tell the story that sparked it. I want to save that for the book. It is a pretty good story.
Now, George, what we think is you give a playbook to emerging leaders who are managing change through systems. And if you follow this playbook, then, you're going to have more success. When you think about, change and the playbook and all of those things, what runs through your mind? Give our listeners a little bit of insight there.
Totally. And I just want to add to that, because this is a really important thing for me, what you just said. I outright say, I am not saying if you do these 6 things, everything will be fixed. It is hey, I'm giving you some ideas. Ultimately, you create the solutions. And through that reflection and those conversations that you have, and those are meant to have personal reflections, but also conversations, not just with your staff, but your community, whether your school boards, your families, is to hey, I like what he said here, but this is a little bit different here. How do we modify that? And that is my belief. First of all, I don't like being told what to do. And I don't think anybody in education likes it. And I talked about the teacher paradox. Hey, how am I effective? Tell me exactly what to do tomorrow, but don't you dare tell me what to do, right? That's how we are in education. And so hey, here's just some ideas for you, but you have to understand your context. I don't understand your situation. I don't know your community. That's why relationships are so important in our work, is because that's why you get to know people. Otherwise, we could just carbon copy solutions, but there is a human element. And the one thing you mentioned, I got from the editor, I got pushback. Hey, we need to mash all these together. I'm like, no. It is very distinct. These are the big foundational things, but they don't always work. And so the perspectives are hey, when things don't work, how do we stay grounded and hold true to those principles? That was really important for me, because it is acknowledging I can kind of give you a bit of a roadmap, but you're still going to go off course sometimes. And what gets you back onto that space to kind of think differently.
So, George, I want to wrap up with just one question. And your book is broken into principles and perspectives.
Yes.
And I love the flow of it. And I love all of the conversation. And again, it feels just a lot like this podcast to me.
I just want to say how much I appreciate that you guys make me feel about this book. both of you. I'm telling you, you just send me an email after, and I'm just like, yeah, like I'm very proud of this book. I'm very proud of this book, but I also want to hear it's good. So you did that for me, and you have just lit me up. So I'm so excited. So, and I respect both of you tremendously. So it meant a lot. So thank you.
The book is phenomenal, and I think it's a great way to capture your wisdom over time, George. I think that's you've lived this wisdom, you've thought about it, you've presented on it, you've been tested on it. You talk about that in the book about being tested on ideas. And for a moment, just entertain this, George. So I'm stepping into a new leadership role as a school principal or maybe a head of school. And a lot of people listening to this are about to step into those roles as they're accepting them. We know community is really important. And in the spirit of Forward Together, you only have a couple minutes to give advice as to where to start building community. You're new to the community. What is the advice, the sage wisdom that you've collected over your 30 plus years in education, reading, researching, presenting? How are you going to talk to me about that? How are you going to get me off on the right foot? Aside from read my book, tell me what advice you would give.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, when you left off one thing is growing up in a restaurant, as I mentioned earlier, and the way that I watched my parents just make people feel when they walked in and how they appreciate it. And I remember, like, I was a principal. I don't know if it's young now, because it seems like there's a lot of younger principals going on, because it doesn't seem like people want to do it anymore. But at the time, I think I was 31, 32 years old. And, there's a lot of things I didn't know. And I share a story about a teacher that I had messed up with. And really, she showed me a better way of doing things. And what I think one of the things that connected me with the staff, they're like, this guy's young. I don't know if he knows what he's doing, but he's outside with those kids all the time, and you can tell he likes them. You can tell he likes them. Like, he might not be the brightest person, right? But he, at least his heart is in the right place. He wants to be there. And I did everything to we're all from Canada. I was outside every day playing with students, hanging out with kids, talking to families, making it so easy for them to connect with me. And the beautiful thing about that is, a lot of time there's almost this pushback a little bit. It's kind of funny. They're like, oh, have you tried relationships? Like, there's like, I don't think anyone's saying relationships are the end all be all, but they are the foundational thing. And sometimes when you invest early in your families, when you go quickly, an hour conversation can actually become a 1 minute conversation, because you have a rapport. They know that they care about the students. They know that you want to do the best by the family. So for me, when you're entering a new school, and I think that's one piece of advice, is really build those connections, not just with your staff, but with the community, with the students, so that they know you, that they see you and you're visible. But the other thing too, and I think this is something that I've shared for a while, I'm known as the change guy because of Innovator's Mindset. This guy talks about change, how important it is. I'm often asked, what's the first thing you would change if you went to a new school? And my answer is always the same: nothing. I would change nothing. What I would do is I would get to know the people. I would get to know who I serve. I get to know where they've gone. I get to know what they're good at. And then where do they want to go? And what I would do is I would make sure I know every person's strength, what they're really good at on my staff. And I make sure they know I know. Because if people think you are going in to change them, they will fight you. But if people know they are valued, they will go along that journey with you. And I think that, to me, is where you start. And I think that's the whole premise of Forward Together, is really appreciating the people that are in front of you, and even the people that disagree with you, and kind of seeing that maybe they have a perspective. Like, one of the things I talk about, and you can see it throughout the book, maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I'm wrong about this too, and I'm okay with that. And I think that comes back to the notion of confidence. Like, I don't have to be always right, but I'm gonna do what's right. And that doesn't mean just what I want. It means what's best. And it's not always my idea. It's figuring out what's the best idea for our community.
Hey, George, before we did this podcast, you sent us a preview of this book, and we just want to say we really appreciate having the opportunity to read it, and having the trust, that you gave us to have that preview copy.
Well, thanks for not tweeting it out to everybody. Thanks for not posting it openly online. Well,
All right.
I so appreciate you guys for taking the time to read it, and I appreciate you lifted me up in the process. It really meant a lot. Garth, I showed my wife your review, and this is so good. I'm so excited about this, so I really appreciate it.
Feeling a lot of pressure to write a review for your book, George. I'm feeling very left out on this.
Wow.
Your relationship you've formed with my buddy Garth here.
All right, George, let's wrap this up. Why don't you take us home with our signature tagline? I'm sure you remember it this time.
There's something with Ted Lasso. I just know it's Ted Lasso, right?
You couldn't do it last time either. Until next time, keep reading and leading the Lasso way. George, thanks for being here, buddy. I really, really appreciate you.
I said there was something with Lasso.
Grab your coffee, grab your seat. It's time to learn, it's time to meet. Garth and Jason setting the tone. Leadership lessons to take back home. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the